My name's Hanna. I'm a sculptor and socially engaged artist, and I'm based in Glasgow. Much of my work is really to do with communities and how we connect with each other. So I do a lot of socially engaged practice, creating artworks for public display, so in parks, cities, that sort of thing. And really my kind of main interest within it is how we can foster community connections, looking at mental health and wellbeing mostly. So the vinyl installation that I've created is called This Is Temporary. It's a neon work, and it's really looking at the kind of mental health crisis that we have in the UK at the moment. I suppose that some interesting context for this is that in 2018 we got our first Minister for Loneliness, and the kind of social situation within Perth and Kinross we have quite a high level of suicide and mental health related issues. So this piece is really to kind of contextualise that and look at that in more depth, particularly in a kind of spatial context. So when we think about loneliness, we're kind of thinking about disconnection from others, isolation, and quite often we can think about that only in relationship to the mind or the body, and really it can also be seen as a spatial element, so thinking about the architecture of a city and how you move through that space and how that can impact mental health. So yeah, I think what I was interested in with this work was to kind of create a comment and bring to the fore how mental health issues can sometimes be put to the side, and just making that really visible, and hopefully kind of spurring viewers to think about how they're interacting in their daily contexts, and being kind to each other and being empathetic, and knowing that I suppose this is temporary is asking you to think about that if you're going through something difficult, or things feel like they're not going to end, or things are just feeling really impossible, that those kind of loops of spiraling thinking can be put at a full stop, and you can be reframed to that this is temporary. The inspiration for my piece was quite varied. So when I'm working in a community context or in a public art context, I always start with a kind of deep dive into the history of the place. So I spent a lot of time at the archive kind of doing research around the vinyls and looking at how they changed over time, and I suppose the moments of human touch that were captured in the archives. And then I was thinking more directly about the experience of living in Perth and the community there, and was quite struck looking at the statistics on mental health in the area, particularly male mental health and suicide. And I think, it was horrible to see that those stats are so high in the area compared to the rest of Scotland. And that really got me thinking about how I could use this artwork to address that, and to draw attention to that. I'd also provide a universality that would speak to loads of diverse life experiences, not just mental health, but any sort of struggles that people may have. And I think I'm quite conscious of that in my work, to make sure that it is accessible and can be read in loads of different ways. I think, especially with text work, I'm really happy for viewers to take from it what comes to them, and just allow the work to speak through them and their experience. So yeah, my inspiration really came from that, and also just I also use my daily life in my work quite a lot, and so I suppose memories of walking around Perth when I lived here, conversations with my partner about the project and about mental health, and how sometimes just that small moment in your day can make all the difference. So I suppose I imagined someone coming across the artwork by chance, especially on their way to work, or coming home from a night out, or on a walk as a mental health exercise, and thinking, oh, that's different, I've not seen that before, and to take a moment with that work. I really thought about it in relation to one viewer having this very private moment with the work. And yeah, really hope that it does provide that space for people to stop and reflect on how things are and how things can evolve and be transient and temporary. So the journey from initial idea to final installation with any public art is always a bit of a long one. So the initial idea was sparked through a conversation with my partner, actually. We both lived here in Perth, and I was discussing the commission. And I work a lot with text because I think it's a really poignant way to get your message across. It's really accessible. So text was kind of my starting point, and I was doing some in-depth research about the area, and I was really affronted by the statistics, especially on male suicide within the area, and how it is so much higher in this region than the rest of Scotland. And it was interesting, I mean, very saddening, but I think in the reporting it was suggesting that rurality might have had something to do with it. But it just got me reflecting on how disparate our communities have sometimes become, and quite isolating. And I thought that that would be a really important thing to look at. Having conversations with my partner, we were just discussing, different phrases that would kind of lift up in a way that doesn't diminish the experience. And I think thinking that things are temporal is quite powerful because it recognises where you are, but allows you to see a path through. So from that initial kind of conversation, I then became a drawing. So I was looking at the vennels, doing drawings of the vennels, and very rough drawings of text on the wall. And then my kind of next process was to put that through some CAD software, so designing that in CAD to get the text just right, all the placements, the sizes, and looking at that in relation to the space to make sure it was fitting and didn't totally dominate the space either. I kind of hoped that it would be, I imagined someone rushing on their way to work and glancing behind them and just seeing it and it being a quite in-the-moment discovery. So I didn't want it to be completely overbearing. And in terms of materials, I was thinking what would kind of show that essence of things can get better. And I suppose light is such a powerful thing to think about when you're thinking about rejuvenation or things getting better. So neon seemed like the best way to capture that, and then I started working with Solas to get that into fruition and design drawings going back and forth with them. So and then finally fabricated. So I have quite a connection to Perth. I lived here for 6 months, and I had a real draw to the city. I think I spent a lot of the time just like walking about within the city, through the vennels and the streets, and also through the natural world outside. The woodlands and the countryside is so lovely. And I think I also did a project for Perth Museum and Art Gallery previously, the Unicorn Project, which was a really beautiful one to be a part of, looking at LGBT experience in the community. And then, I think Perth is a really beautiful place. It has such a rich history and culture, which as an artist is always really interesting to delve into. For this project as well, I spent a good amount of time at the archives, which was very interesting. And Perth's great. So when I was working in the archives in Perth, I was really looking for these kind of little notations or little hidden bits of information where you could see the touch of somebody. So looking at building plans for the buildings along the vennels and seeing the notations of, oh, this is getting changed, and so-and-so wants to change the license to convert it into a shop or different things like that. So thinking about how the people within a place are kind of memorialised within an archive, and even just the process of that archiving is really lovely. You know, all the tiny little bits of paper and all the notations. So I think archives are a really great way to get a sense of the history of a place and how that relates to now. So when I'm working with a public commission, the history and the culture of a place is really important, and I think it's a miss to skim over that. So it's always, really interesting to see how a place evolves. And I suppose a lot of my time as an artist, I think towards what I call a kind of imagined future of like how we can change kind of societal thinking, and also spatially how a city can change while still honouring the past and giving space to that while moving forward as well. So I think for me, Venel is almost like a little secret. It's like almost being on the sidelines, having a little shortcut to skip through, and that really close link to history. And I think especially in historic towns and cities, those little moments where you feel that, you know, people hundreds of years ago have walked down the same street as you, and that, I suppose, grounding within space and time. And I suppose thinking in relation to the commission, it's like, how can we, again, honour these places and still give them new life and new context? So I think, the Venels project is a great one to be thinking about the past as well as the present, and how there is that feedback loop in history, and moving forward, thinking about relationships and space and people. For me, I'm really interested in any project where the context of it is very present. I think when artists work in the public realm, it's important not to helicopter in an artwork that has no context to the community and just is in and of itself. So the way that this project allowed me to dip into the archives, into the history, the current social, economic, community background of the place as well, really drew me to the project. And I think, that thinking of a holistic view to an artwork that builds upon the sense of place rather than parachuting an idea onto a community that isn't relevant, doesn't make sense, and can tend to be an ego boost for the artist, let's say. But I think Perth is a really great city at honouring its heritage and bringing newness in as well. At the end of the day, we all want to be challenged in our everyday lives, see something new and exciting, something we've never seen before, or just a moment to stop and think. And artworks provide that break from everyday life, to stop and to pull you out of the everyday and take a breath. So I think what I'm hoping most is for people to use this artwork to stop for a moment, and to, no matter how busy their day is, what's going on at home, what's going on at work, to kind of let those stressors or racing thoughts just settle for a moment and realise that you can take this time to take a break, and whatever you're going through is temporary, and I think the artwork can act as a protector of space to allow for that, and to challenge, I suppose, our ideas around community connection, because I think quite often, especially in a city, we're all very self-absorbed and unaware about what's going on around us, and to use that moment to think, what's going on for me, what's going on for my neighbour, and just focus in on that empathy and care that I think sometimes gets lost in the mix. So yeah, and a greater awareness of mental health, and that, you know, it's okay to talk about these things, and it's important to talk about these things. I think creativity in public space is so important, mostly because I think the way that we live now doesn't actually inspire creativity. We're quite easy to put ourselves into boxes and like to not allow ourselves to play. And I think it's always been a big part of human psyche to create, and whether that's art, music, dance. I think having public artworks is really important to remind us of that and remind us that we're all creative. And it's an essential part of who we are as humans. Creative activity really changes the way you think and allows for you to work through problems, to think differently than you normally would. A lot of the work that I do with communities is looking at that, of like, how can we use a creative activity in order to give us space to process and think about what's going on for us and what's going on for the wider community. So I think public artworks are a great way to do that and give that space to exploration, and also just make the place more beautiful, and that's really important too. I think Perth being the UK's first UNESCO City of Craft is really important. It's a great accolade. I mean, crafts generally have been dwindling, and, you know, people not taking as much of an interest, so loads of crafts are endangered and are drifting away. I do, for instance, a lot of willow weaving. That's a bit of a dying craft, but yeah, all of these different things, very traditional skills, are getting lost, and I think it's a real shame. And yeah, drawing attention to that's really important. For my commission, I worked with a fabricator, so I worked with Solas Signs, and they've got years and years of experience of working with neon, which is actually a bit older than you would think it was, that craft. And I think the beauty of being an artist is that you can collaborate and you can work with other people. You don't have to gather up all of these skills. It's a collaborative working is such a joy and really fruitful. You know, at the end of the day, working in collaboration means that you're gonna share ideas and be more creative, and also widen opportunities out. I think it's really important for me, and part of my practice is to collaborate and to give craftspeople the recognition they deserve, because they're the experts and they really know what they're doing. So together we can create something really nice.